So we're going through the Yud Gimel Ikrem, and we're up to the seventh Ikar, the seventh principle, and that is, we talked last week about believing in prophets, and of course, the greatest prophet of all prophets, and that's a separate principle of the Rambam, that we believe with our complete faith that the prophecy of Moshe Rabbeinu is the absolute truth, and that he was the chief of all prophets, both before and after him. This is the language of the Ani Maimon that some people even say every day. So we really need to understand what makes Moshe Rabbeinu the chief prophet. No one before him, no one after him is great as he. Why? So this is something that we really need to know. It really behooves every Yid to know this. Moshe Rabbeinu, we believe in Moshe Rabbeinu because we were present at Matan Torah when Hashem revealed himself to several million Jews, because we know that the Torah says that there were males, 600,000 males between the age of 20 and 60. So of course there are many people younger and older, not including women, not including children. So there are millions of Jews, and everyone saw and heard equally the revelation of Sinai. But what's so important to know, and not everybody knows, is that God spoke to Moshe publicly in front of all the Jews. So we all saw and heard that Hashem singled out Moshe Rabbeinu and spoke to him. There's nothing more powerful than we witnessed that. We heard and saw that. No prophet had this. We didn't see how Hashem spoke to him. But Moshe Rabbeinu, the entire Jewish nation, witnessed Hashem speaking to Moshe. So therefore, the confirmation about Moshe Rabbeinu is the strongest. And therefore, if any prophet would contradict anything that Moshe Rabbeinu said, he's automatically he's not a true prophet, because Moshe Rabbeinu's prophecy is confirmed by Hashem. And we're going to talk about this soon in detail. But this is the major difference between all prophets and Moshe Rabbeinu. This is not, I don't want to get off the topic, but this whole thing that the Jews witnessed Hashem at Sinai is very important. Many, many Jews, who knows how many, maybe the majority of Jews today don't even know that all the Jews were present. You ask a Jewish man off the street, oh, Moses went on the mountain. Moses went on the mountain? How do you know he went on the mountain? Maybe he didn't go on the mountain. That all Jews were present at Sinai when Hashem spoke to them, unfortunately, is not even known today. For sure, Of course, a Yid who learns Torah knows this, but a person who never learned in a yeshiva or whatever, this is totally new to him. Never heard such a thing. But this is basic Judaism. So our religion, incidentally, is the only religion in the world that millions of Jews witnessed. No religion has that. This guy Muhammad, he went up to the mountain with the horse, whatever. Whatever. He went up, maybe he went down, maybe he was off the Raqqa. There's no proof on anything. No religion has such a thing that millions of Jews witnessed Hashem. And it was handed down till today of a fact in history. It's not because it says so in the Torah. It's because this was witnessed by so many people, the same experience, and this experience was handed down from generation to generation. So this is something very important for everyone to know. Our religion we confirmed it. We all are there. Okay, let's go back to Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu, when he was on Sinai, at Sinai, all the Jews heard only the Aseres Hadibros. And really, in that itself, there are several different opinions. Did they hear all 10 individually? Or maybe they all heard all 10 simultaneously. But the first two, they definitely heard individually, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, which is the first, and they heard Lo Yilach. But what happened after that? Moshe Rabbeinu remained on Sinai, and he got a crash course from Hashem. The whole religion, everything in the Chumash, every law with all the details of every mitzvah was all taught to Moshe Rabbeinu those 40 days and 40 nights. Not only did he learn the whole Torah and all the details of every mitzvah, but we believe that Moshe was taught in those 40 days and 40 nights. He learned everything that there is in Torah, to the point that the Talmud states that Kol ma shetalmid vosik osid lechadash, any kind of Talmud Chacham that comes up throughout the generations, comes up with a new insight in Torah, if it's correct what he is saying, then that was also given at Sinai to Moshe Rabbeinu. There is nothing new that can be given that was not already taught to Moshe Rabbeinu. This is very basic, very important to know. So, not only did Moshe Rabbeinu learn everything in the Torah, he also learned everything that's going to happen throughout the generations. For instance, the Shulchan Aruch, every law in the Shulchan Aruch, all the details of things that came up thousands of years later, and how to deal with it. If it's legit Torah, if it's consistent with the principles of the Torah, that too was taught to Moshe Rabbeinu. You may ask, how is that possible? How could he learn so much, so much? So I'll answer you with another question. It says that Moshe Rabbeinu also saw all the generations and all the people of every generation till the time of Mashiach, and probably including the time of Mashiach. Moshe Rabbeinu, within time, he was revealed things that are beyond time. How can you learn and see of every generation? But that's what the fact is. Hashem showed him everything. So this is very important to know, that anything that you'll find that a Talmud Chacham today writes a sefer, if whatever he says is consistent with everything that other great rabbis said, and he comes up with a new insight, if this insight is correct, it's a part of Torah and it was given by Sinai. And if it was not given, then it's not Torah. What means not Torah? Torah is divine. Torah is not just ideas and laws. Every word of Torah is infinite. It has a special holiness to it. And we are obligated to make a special blessing, which we do in the morning, a blessing that Hashem gave us the opportunity to learn Torah. If it's not Torah, then you don't have to make a blessing. But if it is Torah, before you learn this Torah, you have to make a blessing, because this is divine. This is a revelation from Hashem. Okay, so let's go back now to Moshe Rabbeinu, and let's talk a little bit about Moshe Rabbeinu. One of the things about Moshe Rabbeinu is that Moshe Rabbeinu, when he had prophecy, he could stand like a regular person and get the revelation, not like every prophet that when he experienced prophecy, he couldn't even stand on his feet. He was totally like unconscious. Moshe Rabbeinu, every time of the day, he could stand like any human being, and Hashem would reveal himself to him. You don't find this in any prophet throughout the history. Another thing about it, Moshe Rabbeinu, the Torah says that Moshe Rabbeinu spoke to Hashem face to face. What means face to face? Hashem does not have a face. Hashem doesn't have any form, not only not a physical form, he doesn't have any definition. So what does it mean, face to face? These are the words of the Torah. Face, as we mentioned, I believe, many times, in Hebrew, panim has another translation. Panim could mean pinim, the inside, the essence. Moshe Rabbeinu experienced the essence of Hashem. There is Hashem as a creator, as a merciful, as a infinite, eternal. These are all titles about Hashem. But what about Hashem himself? Moshe Rabbeinu experienced the essence of Hashem, and it reached into his essence, his panim. And this is what it means, panim el panim. Another very important thing to understand, that when you look in the prophets, Whenever we say Haftorahs many times, most of the time, when a prophet prophesizes, he begins with the words, Ko Oma Hashem. So Hashem said. What's this Ko? Like this. A regular prophet does not experience the essence. It's like this. Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't say that. Moshe Rabbeinu used to say Zeh. Zeh in Hebrew is like you could point with your finger. I see him. Moshe Rabbeinu's prophecy was seeing. Again, we're not using physical eyes here, but seeing means experiencing Hashem the way he is. When something is shown to you, when something is made available for you to see, it's not condensed according to your capacity. Whatever it is being shown to you. Moshe Rabbeinu's prophecy was clear. As Hashem is, that's what he experienced. So he would say Zeh, where all prophets could only say like this, Ko Oma Hashem. Another thing about Moshe Rabbeinu is that we find that Chazal say, Moshe Emes, V'soirosai, and his Torah is Emes. Not only is the Torah Emes, but Moshe Rabbeinu's being is Emes. I believe we talked about this a few weeks ago, and please correct me if I didn't, tell me. But we talked about the definition of Emes. Contrary to the secular way of understanding truth, that truth means the opposite of a lie. But in the Torah, something may not be a lie, but it's far from emes. The word emes is brought down in the Jerusalem Talmud, that the word emes is spelled Aleph Mem Taf. Aleph is the first letter of the Aleph base. Mem is the middle letter. Taf is the last letter. Emes is something that never changes. From the beginning through the middle till the end, it always is the same. And that is only Hashem is emes, the Torah is emes, and Moshe was emes. Where do we see this about Moshe? That he was emes. So we find this right in the beginning, and it's in this week's Parsha. It's everything by divine providence. This week's Parsha is Shmos. And what does it say? That when Moshe Rabbeinu was born, Rashi says, the whole, on the words that she saw him ki tov, says Rashi, when Moshe Rabbeinu was born, nismale habayis, kulai ora, the whole house lit up. He was so holy from the beginning. He started off on day one. He was incredibly holy and lit up the whole house. We're not talking about physical light, but he lit up the house with godly light. Moshe Rabbeinu's symbol is he always was on that madrega that he was, from the beginning till the end. And that is also connected where it says that Moshe never died. Because again, emes cannot ever cease to exist. If it ever ceases to exist, it's not true in the first place. So therefore, as we're going to learn later, when we're going to talk about the Torah that cannot change, I'll just go over this briefly. The Rambam says, when he talks about the belief that Torah cannot change, everything it says in the Torah will never change because it's emes, and emes can never change. If Torah would be something that is just a guide how to lead our lives, then you could argue there are certain times that we're not going to need all these restrictions, as we do find that that before Matan Torah there was less commandments, and even while Moshe Rabbeinu was in the Midbar, he didn't give us all the commandments at one time. There was certain when he decided, when Hashem wanted him to reveal, and as time went on, there were more restrictions. So one could think that maybe there would be a time that we're not going to need all these mitzvahs, because after all, we're not going to need all these disciplines. We're going to be on a high level. Says the Rambam, the Torah is in the first place unchangeable. It can't change because it's God. God himself is not for something. He is because he is. And the Torah is not just a guide to lead our lives. Torah is God. So therefore, the mitzvahs cannot change. Not only they will not change, they can't be changed because it's God himself, and God cannot change. So getting back to Moshe, Moshe's symbol is emes, because in him, he was so humble, he had no self. So in him shined Hashem's emes. And therefore, everything, it's interesting, another interesting point that I just reminded myself. This is very interesting. Everything that Moshe Rabbeinu did had to be forever. I don't know if our listeners know this, but the Mishkan that Moshe Rabbeinu built was never destroyed. It can't be destroyed because Moshe is emes, and whatever he does is forever. The Mishkan is now hidden. When Mashiach will come, the Mishkan is going to be set up adjacent to the Beis HaMikdash, because whatever Moshe Rabbeinu did is forever. And one of the reasons that Moshe Rabbeinu did not merit to go to Eretz Yisrael is because Hashem knew that if Moshe Rabbeinu brings the Jews into Eretz Yisrael, they can never believe. There will never be a Chorban. There will never be a destruction. But Hashem saw the future, that there have to be a destruction. So therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu was not able to go into Eretz Yisrael, because whatever Moshe Rabbeinu does is forever. He's emes, and emes is eternal and no change. So when a prophet would chas v'sholem contradict Moshe Rabbeinu is automatically false. And make it even more interesting, the only reason we listen to prophets is based because Moshe said so, that we should listen to prophets. But if a Navi will contradict something of Moshe, he's illegit. It's the absolute truth. We also have to understand Moshe Rabbeinu was considered a mediator between Hashem and the Jewish people. So there's a big question. How could you have a mediator? This is contrary to our belief that we don't have any mediator. We only turn to Hashem and only to Hashem. When we learned about davening, to pray to Hashem, we taught that the basic principle is that anytime you're in need, you know there's only one who is in charge of everything. No mediators. So how can the Torah say, Hashem, Moshe Rabbeinu writes in the Torah, I was a mediator between you and Hashem. How is that? So how does that work? So the answer is, and we touched about this maybe last week, Moshe Rabbeinu was so nothing. He had no self. He wasn't a separate entity. Everything he did, everything he said was the words of Hashem. Not it was going through a second party. There was no second party. Like the Gemara says, Shechina midaberes mitoch grono. The Shechina spoke through his throat. It's not, Moshe is not an individual. So we don't believe in any kind of a mediator besides Moshe Rabbeinu, because that's not called a mediator. He doesn't have a self. Everything he says, everything he does is only what Hashem wants him to do, which really touches upon the whole idea of bittul, that the more bittul you are, the closer you could be to Hashem. Because if Hashem means that Hashem is the only existence, then the less you feel yourself, the more you are a vessel that Hashem should be felt through you. Moshe Rabbeinu did not have any self. Like it says in the Chumash, Moshe and Aaron said, Va'anachnu ma, who are we? What does that mean? They were on such great bittul that they didn't have no self whatsoever. This is a very important point, because the Alter Rebbe finds this idea of a Moshe Rabbeinu, he puts this in the second Perek of Tanya. Amazing. Such a special topic of a need of a Moshe Rabbeinu. He puts that in the second chapter of the Tanya. But he does. And he brings this out that in every generation, there has to be the soul of Moshe Rabbeinu. And all the spiritual energies to Klal Yisrael of that generation has to go through the Moshe Rabbeinu. If you like it or you don't like it, if you know about it, it doesn't make a difference. He goes on to say, if you have a chance to read the second paragraph, that even the people who are opposing this Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't change, but they can get their energy only through that Moshe Rabbeinu. But if they are opposing him and fighting against him, they're going to get it through a roundabout way. But they can't live a spiritual life if it doesn't come through the Moshe Rabbeinu. So we're really not just talking about once upon a time, a few thousand years ago, there lived such a person who was like, he was the Moshe Rabbeinu, so fine, let him be this, let it be that. We're learning about even in this generation. The Zohar HaKadosh says clearly that in every generation, there has to be the soul of Moshe Rabbeinu. And the Alter Rebbe in the second chapter, when he brings the Talmud, where the Talmud says, Uledafka boy, you have a mitzvah to cleave on to Hashem. Bo, says the Gemara, an amazing Gemara. How could you cleave on to God? You should cleave on to a Talmud Chacham. First of all, how could the Gemara say cleave on to a Talmud Chacham when the Chumash, the Torah, Hashem says, bo, and you're sending me to a Talmud Chacham? That's not what it says in the Chumash. So the Alter Rebbe explains that when a Talmud Chacham doesn't mean a person who knows how to learn Torah or a giant. No, we're talking about someone who is in the Madrega of Chachma of Atzilus. His neshama is an unbelievable neshama. It comes from Chachma Atzilus. Not just it comes while he's here on this world. His neshama down here is Chachma Atzilus. And what's Chachma Atzilus? In Chachma of Atzilus shines Hashem the way he is. And that's what a Moshe Rabbeinu is. He's a Talmud of the Madrega of Chacham. Of Chachma of Atzilus. So therefore the Alter Rebbe says, when you will cleave on to the Moshe Rabbeinu, Hashem is in Moshe Rabbeinu. He has no self. So instead, you're cleaving on to God. It's amazing. This is an open pasuk, and it's one of the 613 mitzvahs. It's not something you could say, I'm not ready. Hashem is giving you one of the Taryag mitzvahs is Uledafka Bai. So first I need to clarify that apparently in Hebrew, the Vekis is much deeper than even the word mitzvah. We mentioned many times that Alter Rebbe translates mitzvah attachment. But the Vekis is even deeper. The Vekis is not even two. It's not two that are attached to each other. The Vekis means you become one. So here we see that you could fulfill 612 mitzvahs. and you are attached to Hashem through every mitzvah. But it's still not dveikis. It's attachment. Fantastic. But there is more. You could become one. How? By cleaving on to the Moshe Rabbeinu of that generation. That's how the Alter Rebbe says this so clearly in the second parak of Tanya. So therefore, when we are talking about Moshe Rabbeinu, we got to realize this is a very important topic. Besides, it's important to know what makes Moshe Rabbeinu more than all prophets. We have to understand that Moshe Rabbeinu is called the mediator between Hashem and us. Hashem set up that. And it's not called through a second party because there's no other party. And that's the meaning of the mitzvah uledavka bay. So, just to conclude, Moshe Rabbeinu, the level of his prophecy was considered seeing. We all know there's nothing more powerful than something that you see. Because something that you see, you could never refute. No matter if it doesn't make sense or somebody will tell you I saw it. That level of prophecy, seeing, also gave us, once the Torah was given through Moshe Rabbeinu, we have the ability to reach an awareness of Hashem like seeing. And that is one of the explanations why Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to go to Eretz Yisrael. Wasn't for himself. He believed that if he would go into Eretz Yisrael, he would elevate the Jews, because he's going with the Jews. He would elevate the Jews to that level of seeing godliness. Unfortunately, we were not zoicha to that. However, it says in the Torah that Hashem said to Moshe Rabbeinu, you're not going to be able to enter, but I'm going to show you. And Hashem, he went up on a mountain, Hashem showed him east, west, north, south. What was that for? In some sense, it made the avoda of Yidden in Eretz Yisrael much deeper and greater, because Moshe Rabbeinu at least saw from far Eretz Yisrael. And now let me just conclude with one more point. We find in the Torah, in the 5th volume of the Torah, we find that it almost sounds like, chas v'sholem, that the 5th volume is only what Moshe said. That's how Devarim begins. These are the words that Moshe Rabbeinu said before he passed on. Does that, so, and the Talmud says, Moshe Rabbeinu is saying what he said. These are the words of Moshe. Yet, we know that every word in Devarim is just as holy as the first 4 volumes. Although it states clearly these are the words of Moshe. Again, we go back to the same idea. Words of Moshe is again the words of Hashem. Moshe Rabbeinu was not an entity of his own. So here you have again this very strong demonstration. We're saying it's godly, it's just as holy, and yet is the words of Moshe. The same way we find that Moshe Rabbeinu translated the Torah in 70 languages. And the reason for that was that if any Jew in any time in the world, if he is going to live in a country that talks a different language, Moshe Rabbeinu was able to put in the holiness of the Torah, even in those languages. So on one hand, it's another language. No way is it near Lashon Kodesh. But only Moshe, who was who he was able to accomplish by him translating the Torah in 70 languages, that if a Yid, let's say in Spain, is going to learn Torah in Spanish, he's going to be Mekayim, the mitzvah of learning Torah, although it's in a different language. Only a Moshe Rabbeinu would be able to do that, to bring in the holiness of the Torah into all the languages. And that is again because Moshe is emes, and emes that doesn't end in every aspect, it's still emes. I hope this is going to be helpful for everyone. And if anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask.
Rabbi Gurary, this is Leah. I'm not sure I understood when you were discussing the fact that the essence of Moshe or Moshe exists in every generation. Could you give an example? Are you saying through the Gedolei HaTorah?
Yes. You have to open up. I suggest if you have a Tanya at home, the Alter Rebbe states in the 2nd chapter that in every generation, Hashem brings in certain leaders, he brings in the anitzos of the soul of Moshe Rabbeinu. There has to be in every generation Moshe Rabbeinu's soul, who is a general neshama that includes all the neshamas of that generation. You see, the word Talmud Chacham is used very loosely now. Any person who's a learned person, we call him a Talmud Chacham. But in the real meaning of a Talmud Chacham means that he's a whole different neshama. He has a neshama from Chachma d'Atzilis, and his neshama is a general neshama that includes all the neshamas of that generation. I'm not making this up myself. It says so in the Zohar. Hello? It says so in the Zohar, and the Alter Rebbe makes this very, very simple and practical, that in every generation there has to be such a thing. Hashem makes, but we're not talking, you see, the word today, we use Gedolim, Gadol Hador, it's a whole different language. And you could be a Gadol Hador, be very famous, but that doesn't mean that your neshama is the general neshama that includes all the neshamas of that generation. There's only a Moshe Rabbeinu. The soul of Moshe Rabbeinu has that. It's not, I know, Leah, I understand it sounds like a little new to you, and it would be new to anybody who never learned Tanya, but in Tanya, it's very prominent. It's right in the second chapter that there are different souls. It's not about just being a tzaddik, living a righteous life. There's additional to being a righteous person. What kind of soul do you have? What kind of a neshama you have? Are you a neshama that includes all the neshamas of the generation? Hello, Leah?
That's, I hear what you're saying. I think I have to pick up a copy of the Tanya and read it.
Definitely, I suggest this. And if you could pick one up that has English, it might be better. But you really should learn it slowly, because if you read it, you're never going to get it. But if you want, one day, if you call me, we could learn it together, and I'll be more than happy to go through this chapter. But it's a fascinating concept. It's a fascinating concept.
Wow. Thank you very much.
You should be benched. Does anybody else have a question?
Shalom Harav.
How are you?
Moshe Kaplan. I want to ask the Rav, first of all, for blessing for my Machtenister. The name is Ayala Bas Segula for a
minute. Ayala
Bas Segula.
Oh, that's a beautiful name. Yeah. For Shalema?
For Shalema.
Amen. She should have her for Shalema.
Amen. Amen.
Does she have, what kind of mezuzahs does she have in the house?
Mezuzahs? I'm sure she has good mezuzahs, but I'll try and give her husband a call tonight. And
you know that you're supposed to try to check the mezuzahs, because mezuzahs, letters could fade a little bit, and they become no more kosher. It's very good to check over all the mezuzahs. Mezuzahs is a protection from Hashem. It's in the Shema. It says, Leman Yirbu, this will multiply your days and the days of your children on the earth. It's a guarantee from Hashem that this is a protection. And the Rebbe, thousands and thousands and thousands of people who asked him for blessings, he would right away say, check your mezuzahs. And the tefillin, if it's a male, if they had tefillin, to check, because it says on both, on mezuzahs and tefillin, this brings long and healthy life.
Amen. I have hundreds of stories like that personally of people that with the mezuzahs. You're not talking into the darkness. I 100% agreement. I just want to drop a comment here about the clinging to Hashem, ledafkabo.
Yeah.
In nature, I find that this really complements the idea very much. There are two materials that are made up of exactly the same thing. One is chamin, or charcoal. That you burn a stick, and then you can go right on the sidewalk with it. It's very soft and black. One of the softest things in the world is a charcoal. One of the hardest things in the world, on the other hand, is diamonds. And they're made out of exactly, not a little bit different, exactly the same thing. Both are pure carbon. Now, what's the difference? There is a difference between them. The difference is the way that they're connected to each other. The ofen akshira, the way that they're connecting to each other. The pacham and the charcoal lies in neat rows, all in one plane, in one shetach, So each shetach can dislodge from the one below it, like pieces of paper. But in the diamond, the carbon atoms tie together in knots. They twist and turn, and it's impossible to break them. And you see the result between a weak connection and a strong connection. Here you have something that is, okay, you can write on the sidewalk with it, but you can write your name, I'm here, or play hopscotch. But here, diamonds is a very sought after, beautiful thing. And it's a very useful thing because it's one of the hardest thing known to humanity. It's because it's connected so strongly together. That's the idea. When we connect to Hashem, that's why the Talmid Chacham is who he is, because he's so strongly connected.
Beautiful.
I think.
I want to tell you a story. My father was going to become a chassan. He was going to become engaged with my mother. And my mother was a daughter of a very holy tzaddik. He was a Rebbe himself. And his name was the Kapishonitzer Rebbe. The Kapishonitzer Rebbe, before they were about to get engaged, asked the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe about my father. Is he a Talmid Chacham? Because would be, you want to marry. It's not. The Frierdiker Rebbe replied, by us, Chabad, a Talmid Chacham is way something else. So it's just interesting that a Talmid Chacham, the way the Tanya calls a Talmid Chacham, means he's in the madrega of Chachma of Atzilus. So the word Talmid Chacham is usually meant somebody who's a learned person. But in the reference to what the Alter Rebbe is talking about, the word Talmid Chacham that the Gemara is talking about, Hadbeik Talmid Chacham, is talking about, he's not talking about just a learned person. He's talking about a holy neshama is on the madrega of Chachma Atzilus. Just interesting. Everyone should be blessed. Have a wonderful evening.
Amen.
It's interesting that the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya that the whole Nisayon of Avram Avinu, everyone asks, why do we give him so much credit for the Akedah when he heard it from Hashem himself? Wouldn't everybody do the same? But there's all kinds of answers. But the Alter Rebbe is very, very interesting. He says that the test and what makes it so special about Avraham Avinu, that soon as it came to time, the Torah says, Vayashkem Avraham Baboker. He got up early in the morning. He didn't have to do that. He's not gonna see his son anymore. You could spend time, you could go out. Avraham Avinu, as soon as the time came, he got up, Vayashkem Avraham Baboker. The Zerizos of Avram, that's the specialty of the Akedah. So we learn from this how important is to do things swiftly and not to postpone, and as soon as we can do a mitzvah, we should do it.
Truthfully, I find when I say the Akedah every day, it is a very difficult
Sure.
Idea. The idea of human sacrifice is, antithetical to everything that Judaism is, and it's really gut-wrenching, as they say, to look at it in all its particulars and the emotions that must have come and the contradictions that it proposed,
Sure.
and translate this into our own life, it's just
100%. That is why we read it every day to really to be a Jew the way Hashem wants. I hate to break the news. It's going to require self-sacrifice. There's so many things that it really requires self-sacrifice. So it may not be the same as Avram taking his only child, but the point is that you can't go through life without self-sacrifice. And that's why we always need to be reminded about Avram and Avram the Nakeda. And also, anytime a person goes against his will, you don't feel like doing something, but I do it because Hashem wants me to do it, that is called self-sacrifice. The word nefesh, we find in Chazal that nefesh could also mean will. When a person goes against his will, against his wishes, that's a mini self-sacrifice. It's mesiras nefesh. I'm giving up my will for Hashem. So to Hashem, every time that we do that, we go even when it's not comfortable or where it's very difficult, and we do it, that is considered to Hashem mesiras nefesh.
Well, you know, so many times in history, people do things, what they feel is mesiras nefesh, for what we find out later is wrong reasons. And the idea of sacrificing yourself for various causes is fraught with many lies. And I think that the only way to temper, to make sure that such a thing is for real, is to balance it with the Avos Yisrael.
Of course.
In other words, you are doing what you think is the best thing and idea in the world, and you have to make sure that nobody else is suffering. And this is why we have this dichotomy in the idea of the Chorban Beis Hamikdash. All those people were doing it for self-sacrifice, right? They thought they were totally right. And yet,
I just want to say something that one of the answers of the same question of the Akedah, why, if Hashem himself told Avraham Avinu, I heard this from my grandfather, that he said the biggest self-sacrifice is when you have to make sacrifice on somebody else. It's one thing giving up your life, but when Avraham was told that he has to take Yitzchak's life, this was the greatest self-sacrifice. I'm taking another Jew. Another Jew? That was the biggest self-sacrifice. So of course, that has to always be very, very carefully measured, that my self-sacrifice should not be on the cheshbon of someone else, because it's on ourselves that we have to have mesiras nefesh, but we can't do that to someone else.